All right, so the sun is setting on the Western world this Monday, February 23rd, 2026, and the data currently bleeding out of the dark pools indicates that the global financial system is being prepared for a total overnight liquidation that you were never supposed to witness. While the evening news is reporting on temporary market volatility, the real-time transmission logs streaming into the JON CC archive confirm that the G7 central banks have just initiated a Phase 2 lockdown of the interbank clearing systems. My hands are actually trembling as I look at the settlement delays because they prove that the $30 trillion heist of the middle class has officially moved from the banks to the currency itself. Look at the sweat on my face and realize that this is the final night heist, where the digital records of your wealth are being decoupled from the physical reality of the planet while you sleep. We have officially hit the 0 hour where the interbank settlement market has found zero bids for Western debt. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to expose the hidden overnight protocols and show you why the paper price of silver is about to be incinerated by the opening bell in Asia. The gap between the paper silver price in New York and the actual cost of physical delivery in the East has just shattered the $25 mark tonight, proving that the Western banking cartel has lost all authority over the physical world. We are witnessing a historic market decapitation, where the Western exchanges are desperately quoting $86, while the physical bars in Shanghai are trading at over $110 in the pre-market dark pools. This is the great disconnect that John AG warned was coming, but the speed of tonight's fracture has triggered an emergency alert in the interbank lending markets that hasn't been seen since the 1930s. The vaults in London are being evacuated under the cover of darkness to prevent a public audit of the empty shelves, while the COMEX is reporting technical issues to block retail investors from seeing the total depletion of the registered inventory. If you are not holding physical assets in your own possession tonight, you are essentially standing in a digital burning building with no fire exit. The Monday night session has opened with a catastrophic failure of the interbank settlement layers, as the smart money realizes that the digital dollar has officially entered a terminal feedback loop. We have seen total vault outflows across the Western world accelerate by over 20% in the last 6 hours alone, a rate of physical drain that signifies a total loss of trust in the central bank ledger. There are currently over 70,000 contracts demanding immediate physical delivery that the bullion banks have no way of satisfying, leading to secret overnight bail-in negotiations behind closed doors to seize private deposits to cover the clearinghouse defaults. The global market is no longer a place of price discovery. It is a crime scene where the evidence of a quadrillion-dollar derivative collapse is being hidden behind a series of manufactured system glitches. If you are still holding digital promises for assets you do not physically control, you are holding a claim on a bankruptcy that has already been executed by the technocratic elite. The macro context has shifted into a total hyperinflationary explosion this evening, as the latest emergency data from the shadow banking sector confirms that the purchasing power of Western fiat is being liquidated at a rate of 10% per hour in the offshore markets. This is the definition of a systemic heart attack, where the central banks are trapped between a total sovereign debt default and the immediate destruction of the global social contract. The masses are beginning to realize that the system error messages on their banking apps are not a glitch, but a permanent lock on their economic freedom to prevent a total mass exit from the dollar-based grid. You can verify these numbers through the internal interbank lending rates if you have access to the primary infrastructure. The math is terminal, but the corporate media is being legally gagged under national security orders to prevent a total societal breakdown. JON CC is archiving these final movements of the paper era because the synergy between the current digital blackout and the physical resource shortage is the final chapter of the Great Reset. Geopolitics has officially reached the point of no return this Monday night, as the BRICS nations have announced a total physical settlement mandate for all global energy exports, effectively rendering the paper dollar obsolete in the global trade markets. We are seeing record-breaking physical silver and gold shipments being moved via military escort toward the eastern vaults, effectively stripping the West of its last remaining liquid defenses in a coordinated economic strike. This is the final phase of a financial war where the weapon of choice is the control of the physical world versus the digital illusion of wealth. The United States has attempted to respond by freezing the digital Kazan ledger, but you cannot use a software patch to stop a physical vacuum when you no longer have the metal to back your currency. The fragmentation of the global market is now a historical fact, and the breakout of silver tonight is the alarm bell signaling that the door has been permanently locked for everyone who stayed inside the traditional banking system. An unusual options position has just been identified in the overnight dark pools that suggests the system controllers are preparing for a global transparency reset, where the digital history of private bank ownership will be permanently erased by a simulated massive cyber attack. We are seeing unprecedented volume in deep out-of-the-money puts on every major Western financial institution, indicating that the architects of the system are betting on its total destruction within the next 24 hours. While the retail public is being told to stay calm and trust the process, the scale of these positions occurring just as the interbank lending markets have frozen solid is the final signal that the global elite have completed their transition into the analog world. This is not a theory, it is a data point sitting in the encrypted settlement layers for anyone who knows how to read the signals of the banking cartel. In a world of digital deepfakes, these large-scale tail risk bets are the only honest indicators of where the system controllers expect the world to be by daybreak. The honest bearish case must be stated, because intellectual honesty is what separates a real archive from a channel that follows the fear of the masses. If the central banks manage to implement a total global digital martial law tonight, they might be able to temporarily freeze the prices of physical assets through a total suspension of all legal commerce. Furthermore, if a sudden military intervention occurs in the primary commodity hubs, the geopolitical emergency could be used as an excuse to seize all private holdings of gold and silver for the greater good of the state. However, none of these short-term state actions change the physical reality that the world is currently running a structural deficit in real money that can no longer be ignored or manipulated. You can pass a law to stop a trade, but you cannot pass a law to fill an empty vault. The JON CC data proves that the physical floor of the global economy has moved past the point of state control. Silver has finally shattered the $100 psychological barrier in the overnight OTC markets this evening, creating a massive liquidity vacuum that is sucking the remaining value out of the stock and bond markets. This base-building process that lasted for decades has officially ended, and the vertical reset of the global financial system has begun, leaving the high-frequency trading bots in a state of total paralysis. That $100 level is the new line in the sand for the global market structure, and as long as the Asian exchanges remain open and demanding metal, the momentum remains firmly with the physical owners who are demanding their ounces at any price. The next major resistance levels are now in the thousands, a scenario that the mainstream media called a conspiracy only a few hours ago, yet the depth of the current physical shortage suggests that the move will be finalized before the sun rises tomorrow. You must remain disciplined and focus on the physical delivery failures rather than the pre-recorded market commentary being looped on the news. The interbank settlement average is now acting as a terminal ceiling for the digital dollar, and every time the interbank rate tries to normalize, it is met with a wave of default notices from the primary bullion banks in London and New York. The question for the coming hours is straightforward. Will the G7 governments be forced to declare a total national banking holiday before midnight, or will they allow the ATMs to run completely dry and risk a total collapse of the urban centers? The supply-demand setup for the global financial system is fundamentally broken, and the only way to rebalance the ledger is through a return to a physical asset standard that the West currently lacks. JON CC is tracking the interbank liquidity ratios because that is the live variable that will tell the real story before the final market freeze and the permanent lock on your banking access. When the paper-to-physical ratio finally snaps tonight, the wealth of the world will move from the promise holders to the asset owners in a matter of seconds. The Shanghai Gold Exchange is currently the only functioning price discovery mechanism left on the planet for physical assets, because it is the only exchange that requires the metal to be in the vault before a trade can be executed. The fact that the East is consistently paying 30% more for silver than the paper quotes in New York proves that the seesaw has finally broken, and the arbitrage is now working to liquidate the Western banking system from the inside out. When the Western public realizes that the market price is a rigged simulation, they will find that the local dealers have already been cleared out by the very banks that are telling them to stay calm. This is why the JON CC mission is so critical. We provide the data in the quiet moments so that you can act before the Monday meltdown becomes the permanent reality of the post-dollar world. Reclaiming your sovereignty starts with owning assets that have no digital delete button and no government counterparty required for their value to exist. The high probability of an overnight total internet blackout in the financial zones is now the primary driver of the global risk models, creating a synchronized convergence of risk that the Western world is completely unprepared for. As the interbank communication channels continue to degrade this evening, the natural floor for physical assets increases, creating a wall that the AI trading bots and the state-controlled news networks cannot overcome. We are witnessing the end of the era of digital abstraction and the birth of a physical reality where the control of resources defines the power and sovereignty of every individual. JON CC is the only archive cross-referencing this data across multiple layers of the global grid, showing you the map of the sovereign future, while the mainstream media is still reading from the script of a dead empire. The time for speculation is over. The time for verifiable physical reality has arrived for those who have the eyes to see the heist in progress through the dark pools. The change in total interbank liquidity across all major global exchanges shows a negative trend that is mathematically terminal for a digital economy that relies on constant debt expansion to survive. Silver is the primary industrial insurance for the high technology and green energy sectors, and as the cyber pandemic narratives accelerate tonight, the demand for physical backup systems is gapping higher than at any point in human history. The price suppression of the last decade has left the West with zero strategic reserves, leading to a structural bankruptcy that cannot be fixed by printing more paper or adjusting the digital interest rates on a central bank computer. The ones who check the interbank settlement reports do not need a financial expert to tell them the system is failing. They can see the bankruptcy and the pending status of their own life's work. Protecting your history requires an understanding that we are moving from a world of infinite paper to a world of finite physical truth. The psychological warfare of the current hour is designed to keep you in a state of cognitive freeze, while the global elite quietly move the world's remaining gold and silver into their own private analog archives. They want you to believe that the current system errors are just routine maintenance, while they are using the cover of the night to finalize the largest transfer of wealth in the history of the human race. By the time the new global ledger is officially announced at daybreak, the average citizen will be trapped in a digital identity system with no physical assets to trade for their basic survival. This is why the JON CC archive is providing the evidence of the great confiscation in real time, offering the strategic blueprint for the sovereign individual to survive the reset. Sovereignty is not a gift from the state. It is the physical possession of your own value and your own data outside of their digital panopticon. The return of global physical demand to the silver market tonight is the final test for the Western banking cartel's ability to maintain the illusion of a functioning currency system. If the current gap between the Shanghai pre-market and the New York after-hours does not close within the next few hours, it will trigger a chain reaction of defaults that will leave the bullion banks and the paper exchanges in a state of total liquidation. The banks are currently using every tool in their arsenal, from artificial internet outages to high-frequency spoofing, to prevent this outcome, but they are fighting against the laws of supply and demand. You cannot satisfy a physical requirement with a digital lie, and the coming break will be a total reset that moves wealth from the paper holders to the asset owners. This is the moment of truth that defines the next 100 years of human history, and the data shows that the clock has already hit zero in the dark pools. Stay sovereign, stay informed, and stay physical, because in the archives of history, the only currency that survives the fires of a system reset is the one you can hold in your hand and defend with your integrity. The global market is resetting into the shadows of this Monday night, the digital mask has officially slipped, and the physical truth is finally taking its throne in the vaults of the East and the hands of the sovereign. We will see you on the other side of this Monday meltdown, where the reality of the vaults defines the wealth of nations and the freedom of the individuals who saw the data before the lights went out forever. This is JON CC, and this is the strategic archive of the final days of the digital financial illusion. Thank you for watching, and remember to always verify the physical flow before you trust the numbers on your screen, because in the age of the reset, only the physical is real.